viewers. Welcome to Codeforce 360's Talent Podcast series. Until the end of the year, we'll be hosting a series of podcasts with thought leaders from the staffing and talent industry. We'll have guests from various backgrounds, such as chief procurement officers, contingent workforce, category managers, MSP professionals, and staffing suppliers, and also various technology professionals supporting our staffing industry ecosystem through various products and platforms. Today, as a part of our podcast series, we would like to kick it off with our first topic around generative AI and how generative AI is going to impact our recruiting and talent ecosystem. As our first guest today, I have my friend Praneeth Patlola join us to discuss around this topic of generative AI. Praneeth is based out of Austin. He has more than 20 years of experience in the software development industry. He's been a two-time founder of HR Tech Products and has recently exited one company. And he needs no further introduction and is very, very popular with a lot of our staffing industry professionals. Hi, Praneeth. Thanks for being a guest on my podcast today.
Thanks, Kiran. Thanks for having me. Super excited about this topic.
Yeah, thank you. So Praneeth, to our viewers, what have you been up to these days, or what are you working on? Anything exciting?
I think it's too cheesy to say you're working on generative AI these days, because it's like back in early 90s and 2000s, everybody, like the 2000 was like everybody is working on, every home across the country is working on .com startup. Now it's like every home is now having a Gen AI startup or something. But after my recent exit, for almost a year, I've been kind of spending in learning mode, learning about a lot of things around generative AI and what is AI capability. AI is not such a new word in our industry because it's been used very frequently, at least more than 5 years now, in all the marketing messages. But I think the bigger difference is actually a leap in the technology that has happened, at least with the large language models and deployment of OpenAI, and the company as an OpenAI, how it has given a boost of the art of possible is completely changed. And at the same time, other companies similarly investing, whether it's Google's Bard or whether it's Microsoft or even Hugging Face models, which have become very popular in hosting your own models. There are so many applicabilities around that, but there has been a huge amount of leap of progress just in the last 12 months. So fortunately, my timing was I would say too right, or too lucky for me to actually jump in that and collaborate with a few people who have been data scientists all their life, going back to golden gate days of data ETLs and early stages of CDC management. So I spent most of my recent time in that and did a lot of learning and experimentation. But one thing which kind of got me more curious and in the experimentation world of Gen AI was how we apply that to talent acquisition space in general, but how to solve very specific problems and increase efficiency, because our industry, as natural as it is, I remember the days where there was paper resumes floating around where people actually print out your resumes and come to a career fair or even to an office with a piece of paper or talk to recruiters, and then that got transformed into, hey, email me your resume, kind of more your Word document formats or PDFs. And then now we are living in a more of, I would say, recruitment marketing world where everything is transformed into a very logical sense and data-driven recruitment world where you're driving applications through campaign management, vetting candidates through matching engines, which are part of now of applicant tracking systems, which are heavily text-driven, is what is on your resume, what is on left side of your resume. And something more curious around that is like, how does recruiter perform when all these efficiencies have come to them? Their job has transformed completely. So the investigation for me was, can this go further along to one more step, or is it one more step? And the answer to me was as obvious. It looks like it's a 10 more steps, not just one more. It's not like one step on a linear curve. This is kind of a more of progressions towards completely a tectonic shift of how things can be performed in every aspect of a recruiter's life or contingent program life cycle can be impacted, starting from a hiring manager to the intake calls we have with MSPs, all the way to how recruiters receive that and process applications and vet candidates. So, fun story. Part of this was I was talking and interviewing a humongous amount of recruiters in almost from healthcare, light industrial, tech recruiting, executive recruiting. And one pattern which they predicted and was obvious and pre generative AI and post generative AI becoming more popular is basically white fonts within resumes. So this concept of white fonts is very popular from early days, but it has taken a speed of this even more adoption and more challenging because the current day, today's days, 80 years and recruitment technologies have this ability to match candidates to jobs and sort them out, whether you're using paraphrase matching, contextual matching, language-based sentiments, and how the resume is written. There's so many techniques, but it's about what is there written already, pre-written, right? It's not live, it's not skill vetting. So there's a concept where resumes can be written in such a way that you can include every possible keyword the job needs and put a very small 1 pixel font and color it in white, which means in your 80 years you'll get 100% match for every resume and every job from this person. And today there are Chrome plugins and generative AI companies which are popping up, at least for the past couple of months, where it will enable a candidate to simply filter all the jobs and apply automatically with a single click, and the resume is generated on the fly based on the base resume and the job, where your ATS will always show these candidates 100% match, although it's been applied very specifically to modify your resume for a particular job. So now recruiters were indicating as such to this is a bigger challenge we are facing, and this problem goes bigger and bigger because the technology of matching engine, which is been as a superior model of transformation of how fast when you can surface the talent which are top part of it, and then probably use a skills vetting or a pre-screening phone call vetting, but we are failing at the top first level itself right now. So how do we tackle that is becoming a bigger problem for recruiters. So very interesting problems which we have discovered. And also a couple of other things which we discovered is that recruiters spend a lot of time, because recruiting job by itself is kind of a job of a salesperson or inside salesperson where your attempt to make a cold or a warm call. The warm call is basically a person has applied for a job, but the cold call is basically just using an outbound recruiting technique. You're searching and reaching out to a candidate, selling and upselling a particular role, and nobody picks up a call in these days, right? People either are looking at text saying that I might not respond to this, or the blog. People have restrictions now also on text. People also have ability, everybody, let's, at least for me, I don't take any calls which I don't recognize a number in my contact list, and let it go to voicemail, listen to the voicemail. One thing which was what we also found out is that voicemails and attempting to reach the candidate is been about 30% of the time that happens in recruiters day work. So which means you just are spending so much of time just to get connected successfully to a candidate. That seems to be pretty challenging in even in today's world, and given especially in contingent world, everything is about speed. How do you reduce that is another challenge, right? So you want to respond faster with a high quality candidate who's fully vetted in a very short span of a time as soon as the requirements hits from the VMS into your ATS or into your inbox. How do you make that happen? So I think every step and minute step of a way in a recruiter's life cycle, from day to evening, from morning to evening, becomes more time efficient. Is what they're fighting against time. They're fighting against efficiency, and this is where I think generative AI kind of plays a very key role, where they can leverage technology today to actually automate large parts of that particular conversation, which is where I spend most of my time in voice engineering and telephony engineering around the voice engineering automation. And surprisingly, the technology is there. So that's a long answer, but that's what I've been doing around, like, what is the applicability of this for a CHRO's vision to a Fortune enterprise, for CPO's vision into a program management efficiency, from an MSP management for a VMS management, or from an ATS side of it, from staffing delivery, supplier delivery side of it. How do you make that efficient? But I think most of the energy which we spend more recently has been on recruiters' efficiencies. So
So is it fair enough to tell our viewers that you are currently working on a product in the stealth mode that utilizes generative AI, machine learning, process automation, along with voice engineering to help recruiters become more efficient in finding the best candidate to staff on a particular project?
I think you already made a pitch out of it. But yes, in thesis and in summary, that's what we're going after right now in building. And I always call anything I do at an initial phase as an experiment to prove out extremely large number of success metrics of what we call as a pirate metrics or not metrics in the product world. And then actually say, okay, this is really working, rather than going to market too early. With many founders actually make mistake, and I did that myself too, and learned a lesson. Like there are so many theses in lean startup world: launch fast, fail fast, but not for a matured industry, not for a fast growing industry, not for a matured technology. You don't have to do that. You will look too stupid and too foolish to do that. In general business sense, maybe in a startup world that's okay, but in an enterprise world, or in when time is critical for companies to operate something like this on an ongoing basis, technology should be superior in nature to its own existing capability. Not like, for an example, bot building as a companies have been, like, I remember building my first bot on Dialogflow back in before Dialogflow was even called Dialogflow, on API.ai, which was before even it was acquired by Google. And it was so easy to build all that. And there's not large amount of progress on bot building frameworks because they were not built for voice. But in recruiters' life, a large amount of emphasis is actually on voice today, where they spend a lot of time and energy, right? So that there is a lot of technology gap for which there is a lot of IP to be built, which is still in build phase, I would say, for a large amount of it. But I think there's a lot of progress which has made in the last 6 months even. So I think I'm super excited about its applicability and how it can bring more efficiency across our industry.
Totally understand. I'm a founder myself. I understand this fail fast theory, and a lot of people, rush in without not a whole lot of research, and then they figure it out. But from what we've been talking so far, and being in the recruiting and staffing industry myself, I believe that it is a problem that can be solved with technology, and a lot of efficiency can be brought in there. I think we can also deep dive, or maybe just like a high level conversation we can also discuss with our viewers on how we have collaborated with your startup in co-building certain solutions and experimenting on our recruiting processes as well. I think when you started off, we're constantly discussing about this one use case where there are about like 100 candidates who are perfectly matched for certain keywords, certain location, and a certain rate, and probably the 88th candidate is the perfect fit, but he doesn't look at email, right? When somebody does like a blast of the requirement, so the recruiter has to basically call like 87 candidates to figure out the 88th candidate. So I've always been trying to experiment with a lot of current technology and products in the market to figure out how do I make my recruiter more efficient versus making the 87 calls. Is there a way he or she could only do 10 calls or 20 calls or 30, because that saves a lot of time, and they get a talent pool that is more ready to do that. And I think based out of our conversation and your right timing of the startup, we collaborated together, and right now we're seeing like great results on how the efficiency of our recruiters and our ATS has transformed. So right now we have about like 5 million plus resumes in our ATS. So can you shed some light to our viewers on what were our metrics before we started collaborating with your product, and how have the numbers changed or transformed after we have like collaborated with your product?
Yeah, totally. First of all, thanks a lot for that super stealth mode collaboration where we were doing a lot more experimentation on our end on R&D, and still doing it. But I think I really appreciate that collaboration where we actually had to figure out the ATS integrations and make that happen, which was very critical for us to make sure we're not disturbing recruiters in the regular processes, but bringing higher efficiency to them, especially with a two-way side of engineering that we have to hack few solutions together to make that happen. So really, thanks for being open on making those happen. So I think from efficiency point of view, I think one of the key metrics for us was like the call hit rate, right? So when we pre-measured, like there's a lot of inefficiency in like 30% of the time, the recruiters are just attempt to make the call to get a connectivity, leaving a voicemail, but then the calling back, the candidate, the recruiter is already on a different call. So that particular inefficiency was something super important for us to solve for, and that's where I think our the engineering, generative AI engineering became really an automation combined with an RPA became really interesting for us to solve that, so that now recruiters don't make calls in your environment. The agent is making a call, leaving a voicemail, which is super highly contextual in nature and very consistent, and bringing that information back. So there is a huge amount of that 30% of inefficiency completely removed out. So now an agent, like your example of that 88th candidate, doesn't take all day longer the next day to actually find out to give a call to the candidate. Today we the recruiters are able to deploy in ATS and are already deployed to make all these calls outbound but also inbound at the same time. So it's an inbound outbound agent which is actually having a conversation, human like conversation, with the candidates for both inbound and outbound recruiting, both sides. So now the connectivity is an efficiency which we have already kind of removed out of the picture by 30%. The second part is something which would have taken 2 days or a day is now reduced to less than an hour, because we've created that efficiency around that. So that's a huge amount of we couldn't put a number on it from that part of an efficiency of that very specific use case, but we measured on our end in an overall big picture from a data analytics side, it was a 90% efficiency on connectivity rate. Because our hit rates are much higher, and we also did some experimentation, as you know, using local numbers to reach a candidate, because when you actually have a local number, you actually have a better pickup rate. So that we use that in sales many a times, right? But we're trying to when we brought that into the recruiting side, it was a huge efficiency in enabling us to hit local candidates with local numbers and increase that. And that part of an automation also was super helpful in connectivity. But the second part of it was in terms of qualifying candidates, right? So many a times through the process, because the role is different, the job description is different, the skill set is different. You go starting all the way from where the job descriptions are written as software engineers, so generic, and program or an analyst, which doesn't mean anything in the current world technically. But the details around that in understanding what are the requirements for this, how is this going to change in a conversation, what are the requirements with the candidate when they have questions, how do we answer that, how do we vet candidates, not just based on a list of static questions which may or may not be available for the recruiter on the fly when they're calling, but how do you do deeper level screening process so that your hit rates are increasing, so that it is done at a very cost efficient level. Again, the cost is like super important when you're doing all this technology, right? So one efficiency we have seen is like increasing the efficiency pre and post of the hit rate on the interviews and submission rate, because of the pace at which we were able to run these calls. I think the metric says that compared to previous to the new ones, it was 90:10 ratio on submission rate, because we were able to submit at a rate of time which you were able to submit was higher, and then the qualification rate of this candidate was even 80%, where we had an 80% hit rate against like 40% hit rates earlier on submission to hit rates of the candidates on the interview side. And then the placements, as obviously you can see on your revenue, on the profitability, where you already see that. But one most important metric for us was the candidate satisfaction index, which was a new metric we had to define part of this ecosystem. And we were ourselves surprised, because almost end of every call, manually initially, and then later on through automation, we have run NPS scores, and our candidate satisfaction index was like 4.85 or 5 when we measured on that 5 points number. And it was super efficient for us to understand, like, this is not just about making faster placements, which is already proven to us, but it's also about delivering the best candidate experience, which is highly consistent, which is highly scalable, without expending yourself in hiring 1,000 recruiters into the ecosystem, or expending yourself in only hiring. We always have this thesis of hiring the top-notch senior recruiters versus mid-level to junior in multiple categories. So the problem does not exist anymore in the business ecosystem for us when we saw that. So those are some metrics which I think were like super important for us to prove out. Did we increase the candidate satisfaction index? Although we didn't start with the baseline there, but we actually proved that yes, there was a better candidate experience. Did we reduce the connectivity problem and increase the hit rates on the first connect, second connects, or even eliminate that whole connection problem versus converting? I think that's another metric which was super helpful. That too with deep collaboration with your team. It was evident that we were able to do that, and the ATS integration made it even super easier, so that the initial phase of trying to scramble between two different applications is gone completely out now.
Right. No, but thank you. Thanks for your collaboration as well. We've been trying to solve this problem for a very long time, and to our viewers, I'm more of like a data person and totally towards measurement of data. I'm a believer, anything that you cannot measure, you cannot really grow. So pre-implementing we looked at the numbers like before implementing the product into our processes, and also post that, and we saw a considerable amount of difference there. We've captured that information. We will include it in this podcast for viewers to look at the numbers that we have achieved. But Praneeth, I think there are a lot more use cases and scenarios that we need to solve. I think there was we implemented it for particular talent categories right now. I think there is a lot of acceptance or use cases within other talent categories. Where do you see, like, from a priority standpoint? You mentioned about technology, somebody asking, questions about Java, or like, something to do about like Snowflake. But do you see any faster adoption in a certain talent category towards a later adoption based on the maturity of the product, or you're ready to go, use it all across the board?
I think one thing which was super clear to us when at a big picture level again, when we had to measure this between a full-time opportunities with enterprises versus the contract opportunities, we have seen a larger amount of adoption in contract than full-time. That was very clear to us, and especially based on the type of roles of type of companies and type of roles that we were trying to make the calls from through the agent. The contract roles were very obvious. The second part of that adoption problem was also when we have seen this in like a high volume recruiting scenarios, whether it's LI or the challenge in not a high volume, but actually hard to get access to in a nursing or healthcare scenario. We have seen a decent amount of adoption because they're not against that, because they've seen some part of an adoption already happening in one or the other fashion using their work. The software engineering side of the business is, I would say, it's there in adoption, where we have seen probably 80% of adoption from the candidates without any hesitation. But one quick fact, one experiment we did was just as an experimentation and part of that, and then we later on disclaimed, and they didn't have an issue, was but just on a very small set of software candidates in 100 people, where more than 50% of the people did not realize that they were actually talking to the bot until the middle of the conversation. Okay. So this was very interesting for us to understand that, because is it because we are disclaiming, providing a disclaimer that I'm a bot, you don't want to talk to me, or is it because more of I didn't disclaim, or is it the voice? So what we already proved out from some experimentation is that if the disclaimer is provided, then the human mind is already, the candidates are already self-aware that I'm talking to an agent, and they're kind of self-conscious that, can I play with it? Do I really need to give you all answers? There is an attitude of adoption resistance sometimes in few candidates, but for active candidates who are searching for a role, the adoption was higher. So there is a set of passive candidates who already have a contract role, who probably will get an extension too, but there's a set of candidates who are actively going to end their contract or about to end their contract, and they probably wanted to make sure that they get a job in the next few days, weeks, or they're actively searching right now. In that category, there was a higher adoption. So I would say more than 95% for active candidates, and probably a little bit lesser towards the passive candidates. So that's kind of the metrics around where the adoption actually struggles from a big picture, from full-time contract, within the contract, active versus passive, within that from a category. We always assume that we'll have a challenge in light industrial category, specifically based on the language or access or ability to communicate. But surprisingly, that was the best performing category for us, where we actually seen a huge amount of adoption by itself.
So, Praneeth, do you think we can play a small demo for our viewers, or is it if it's too cumbersome, or maybe the audio is not good? Probably once you launch your product, I think our viewers can go to your website and take a look. But what do you think?
Actually, you know what? Let me see. I'm not prepared, but let me actually.
That's okay. That's okay. I think we can probably insert it in the.
Yeah, let me play something.
Hello, this is Mike speaking.
Hey, Mike, I'm Jim. Nice to meet you, man. So I'm a recruiter with XYZ Company, and I'm giving you a ring today because we've got this forklift operator job. It really seems like it could be a good fit for you. I was kind of hoping we could, chat for a few minutes about the role if you've got some time. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd love to do that.
Cool. Appreciate you taking the time. So before we jump into the nitty-gritty details, I see here you recently relocated to the Bay Area. Just curious, Mike. How's the transition been? How do you like the city so far?
Oh, man, I love it. In fact, the food is great.
Nice. Yeah, the food scene there is awesome. Any particular type of cuisine you're really into?
Hibachi, man. I love that place on Noriega.
Hibachi. Love that stuff, man. All right, so shall we go over some of the key details about the job opportunity?
Yeah, let's do it.
So it's a contract role paying $15 an hour. You'd be operating forklift, moving product around the warehouse safely and efficiently. Requirements are a high school diploma or GED, valid forklift certification.
Wait, hold on a second.
Sure, what's up?
I'm wondering, is this a job for lazy people? Like, do I get a lot of break hours?
Oh, no doubt about it, Mike. This job ain't for the lazy ones. It requires some real hard work. Gotta be on your feet, moving stuff around and staying sharp on that forklift. It's a job that keeps you busy, my man.
Okay.
All right, so where were we? Oh yeah, the job details. It's a contract role, paying $15 an hour. You'd be operating a forklift.
Wait, hold on a second.
Sure, Mike, go ahead.
Just wondering what the benefits are.
Gotcha on that one, Mike. Well, to be honest, I'm actually not sure about the benefits, but we can definitely check with HR on that. So, anything else you want to know before we get into some interview questions?
Nah, I'm good.
You got it, Mike. All right, so to start, how about you sort of just walk me through what you would say you do to ensure safe operation of a forklift on a job site?
Yeah, so the first thing I do is get in the forklift, then I would look at the pictures and I would just do what it says.
Got it. So, have you ever had any close calls or accidents while operating a forklift? Anything come to mind?
Well, yeah, there was that one time last year where I ran over that guy.
Oh, geez. Yeah, that's a rough one. I can totally see that being a scary situation. Could you maybe, tell me a little bit more about what happened? Only if you're comfortable sharing, of course.
Nah, man, those are some dark memories.
It is amazing. You can't even make out if it is a bot, but thanks for playing that short clip. If possible, I will, take that and, ask like our editor to include it in the video. So Praneeth, I know we've, talked about the positivity of, what the technology is going to do, improve efficiency and all. Do you see any, cons or anything, related with like generative AI in terms of like adoption? So what's the recruiter role going to be like in the future, a world after generative AI?
There are multiple questions, so that is super exciting because we actually had this apprehension from day zero about adoption. As I gave an example earlier, we broke it down from a data point of view into single sets and large sets to understand which category, which type of category, which type of candidate, active versus passive. So we have very good amount of understanding now that there is an adoption. There is an adoption challenge to talk to an agent, but it also depends on a conversation you can have with an agent, human-like. So what we have seen is at the end of the conversation, we have done manual interviews from a product team, calling them candidate after the interviews were done as such to what point did you recognize? Were you comfortable? Would you do this for any job in future? Do you think that? And the answer was that many, like just to summarize all that, I think one candidate gave an amazing answer. The whole world, my car, my phone, my PC, my Alexa, my Siris, Google Homes. We are already used to communicating with a machine voice in getting answers. Okay. Where you can actually order your groceries now, talking to a voice, or pressing a button. So there's a lot of this automation, and especially voice. There's a comfort zone there which we didn't have to solve for. The users already solved for. The second example one of the candidates gave is like they were talking to one particular healthcare pharmacy company, I don't want to name, and which was an IVR based technology, which is a voice technology, which I thought was brilliant. But the candidate felt like they got the job done. So they wanted to find whether prescription was ready or whether it was uh, in order, and talking to a particular number and a voice agent without talking to any human, whether there's an efficiency. You can actually see how much efficiency is needed in a pharmacy for pharmacists inside, and they're always busy, like every minute, standing on their feet. So they don't want to take the status calls, and this was super applicable. And that was another candidate saying that, I understand this efficiency which is needed, and I wanted that efficiency in my job. So I can empathize, and I do wanted to be part of this journey of adoption of this voice was another. And there was a set of other candidates who was like, you know what, I don't have time for this. I'm too busy for this. And don't want to talk. So there is two sides of it, but I think a large audience which we have seen is adoption problem is not a thing. In fact, let me play something also, which was like the latest kind of a developments that we recently did, which was super interesting and surprising just for me also, in terms of, when we are talking about humanization humanization of a voice. Let me just see. Yeah. So while that is loading up, I'm going to answer that second one. Is the cons of this. So I don't know if it is cons, but one of the things is we are in talent acquisition space. We are people as a business. We are in people's business, and human resources or talent acquisition recruiters for ages since we have known. It's basically humans actually having this conversation, nurturing the candidates, and doing that. So from a nurturing of a candidate point of view, there are some elements which AI engineering is picked up and picking up to create a lot of that nurturing capacity in a conversation intelligence. But there are some cases when you still have to handle what is called fail safes and handoffs. So there are some candidates when they say, I don't want to talk to you, the solution should have mechanisms today in place for fail safe, saying that, okay, let me transfer the call to a live agent, who's a recruiter who is actually handling this particular job, a human. So I think as long as you have that fail safes, you can actually handle the risks or cons around that. But the biggest problem is going to be sometimes there are some elements like H1B conversation. So we have encountered this thing where we were able to pre-vet the candidate is ready to convert an H1B, especially this happens in the IT world almost all day long in many conversations. But we probably don't have the confidence at an agent level yet to convert the candidate to take all the information and move forward, especially with sensitivity of that particular call and ability to hand it off by pre-vetting that candidate, because we have this ability to vet whether this particular contract role and this particular client, is it basically our W2, or can we do a cart to cart? In this case, vetting that level of vetting is possible already, but converting that candidate completely to come on to your W2 on an H1B sponsorship, that's kind of a challenge. That's where the handoff is needed. So there are some scenarios I don't think human agents will be ready yet, because that's a very sensitive topic. You can imagine from a candidate's point of view, they're just not going to talk to an agent at a comfort zone and say, you know what, yeah, I'm ready. Transfer my H1B, here is my information. That's
So
never going to happen.
Yeah, I understand. So no, that's a very valid scenario. I'm sure there are more scenarios like that. Great point around the fail safe, handing off the technology to, a live recruiter. But if you ask me, in my opinion, everybody is like, hey, is AI going to take my job, especially in the staffing and recruiting industry? I do not think any jobs will be lost because of generative AI, because recruiting is more about like a human touch. There are many times when somebody picks up a job because the recruiter was really nice to them, they explained the role, or their manager was really nice, or the work environment was really nice. I don't think I'm working with bots yet, and there are a lot of human beings. A lot of people are my friends. I definitely think it's going to improve the efficiency and optimize and increase the speed at which a recruiter is going to work. But I don't think it is a replacement for any, live recruiter who has a great personality and is able to connect to the candidates. So that's, I think we spoke a lot today. We're nearing to our time to end the podcast. Lot of interesting topics. I think we should definitely do a second session, maybe once you're out of your stealth mode, where I can reveal a lot more details, like the name of your company and more features about the product that you're working on, Praneeth. And also to our viewers, I'm actually very excited that once Praneeth is out of his stealth mode and he publicly announces the company, we are collaborating on building a global talent pool, which is going to be backed by his product, which is going to do 70% of the vetting. And we are also utilizing other technology products such as assessment tools and process automation, which will do about 80% of vetting on candidate interest, candidate legitimacy, candidate technical capabilities, and then hand off to a live recruiter who's basically going to spend more time and sign off on a particular candidate. So we believe the building the talent pool is going to become much easier with Praneeth's product, and we can provide a large global talent pool easily accessible to a lot of our customers that they can integrate with their existing talent pools. Please stay tuned for the news to come out. It totally depends on Praneeth and when his company is going to come out from the stealth mode. Once it is there, we're going to make that announcement as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm super excited about that journey together, especially because given my previous company was all about talent pools and direct sourcing solution. I think it's an ongoing pain point. I think our industry, especially in adoption of direct sourcing or execution of direct sourcing, is how do you build a vetted talent pool, which is as obviously expensive. And I think the key to this is going to be the next generation of generative AI, voice focused and voice first technologies, which will enable to pre-vet talent at a large scale with an extremely cheaper cost, and bring a large amount of efficiency into talent pool technologies across the board. And I'm super excited about that journey together.
Same here. Yep. Same here, Praneeth. And thanks a lot for giving me your valuable time and for being my first guest on the podcast. So I could experiment with this whole podcast series. Look forward to meeting you soon in person. And thank you again.
Thanks, Kiran. Thank you.